idea is to continue with a few more of Leah Goldberg's poems today, conclude our look at Leah Goldberg, and introduced in a few minutes the next author, the next poet we are going to look at, and that will be Uri Zvi Greenberg. So until then, we are going back to the PowerPoint and going to start our class exactly where we stopped. So on the screen, you have a screen that you have seen already, a slide that you have seen already last week. We are looking at a relatively early poem. You may remember the one about in 1935, as soon as she arrives to Tel Aviv. And this is just a few years later, around 1938, maybe the beginning of 39. There are 2 days of publications, one in a literary magazine and then a slightly later one in a book. So it depends, people will give you different addresses for that. Why am I nudge for the address? Because when we're looking at poetry written in Israel, probably in other places as well, we want to look at the larger context, the historical, etc. A special note is needed here because it is very easy for us to jump into seeing Holocaust metaphors or Holocaust, whatever suggestions or symbolism in modern Jewish poetry. And when a poem was published in 1938, we need to be very careful of that, knowing that, yes, anti-Semitism and pogroms existed, but this is prior to even, I even checked the exact date of publication, so it's prior even to Kristallnacht. So we don't want to go there. Yes, we do want to go into the family experience of Leah Goldberg studying in Germany, Berlin, then Bonn for her PhD, her doctorate, falling in love with another student, Indian. And that would start, I would say, and that's a good point for us to remark, a series of falling in love with a man with whom there was not really much chance to develop a meaningful relationship. So among them, a foreign person, and I'm not looking now at the Jewish, non-Jewish aspect. I'm looking at the aspect that he comes from India with solid plans to go back to India while she is there already planning her aliyah. So what were the chances? Later on in life, we will see her fall in love with, totally committed to their marriage, married man. We will see her fall in love with somebody who was very, very probably, although not discussed at that time, a gay person. So Leah Goldberg is indeed known for somehow falling in love with impossible candidates for a meaningful relationship. Says something about her, maybe. Why again am I mentioning all this? Because when we look at Slichot, there are three pulling powers there. Is this asking forgiveness of herself, of one of those impossible relationships, probably the guy from India in this case, because of the time? Is this somehow connected to another meaningful relationship with somebody in her life who needs to be asked forgiveness by her, which is not a lover? We will discuss that. And then we will want to come out and somehow figure why modern Israel has adopted this poem slash song, remember in Hebrew is the same word, shir, to be the one most and mainly played on Israeli radio, television, and other networks at the time of Slichot. So we have three elements there. Missed love connection, a complicated relationship with a father that was left behind in a mentally ill, a hospital asylum, because he could not be brought to Eretz Israel with them at the time. His condition was terrible. And how and why, many years after Leah Goldberg is gone, and this is set to music, it's set to music 7 years after she died. So she has no personal connection to this phenomena and to the phase that this song will move, poem song will move into. So last week we were looking at this first part, which is normally the part that is sung. So if you know this, you will know just these three early verses or beginning verses. And today I'm planning to show you all of it. I also sent to you my translation. There is no other available translation of the ongoing verses. And as always, you know that my English is far from being a native speaker's English. If any of you sees possibilities for a better translation, corrections, mistakes, please let me know, and I'd love to have them and include them for future reference. So when we were looking at this last week, we were looking at a few elements. One of them, first and above all, that while the title says Slichot, and again, you could make that jump that Israel had done much, much later to bring it into the world of our traditional Slichot, Elul, and between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the poem suggests an addressee who came to open my eyes, and it's probably a person who we will discuss. And then went to the next phase, and that is when this poem describes a process of self-awareness, of learning, of finding out stuff. We saw it at the beginning of the second verse. If the first starts, you came to me to open my eyes. So there is a call, there is a realization of a process starting. This person comes into her life with a cause, with a purpose. The second verse will state, and indeed, my eyes were open and I started learning. We will see what. And then the third verse goes to a different process. After the learning is done, there is a wish for forgiveness and for letting go, for shichror, for liberation. Enough already, which is, of course, one of the reasons why this could be read as that poem written to a lover with whom the relationship did not develop. So wanting and calling for ending of the relationship and for asking forgiveness. I'll click once more to show you how long this is and where we are going later and where it comes from in the paper. I'll come back to that. Okay, so what I also pointed out for you was the second line of the first verse, which suggests three ways of looking. The glance, like a quick look at something, the window, which poses the speaking voice at inside of something, looking out across a window barrier from the inside to the outside. And the third, probably the most important one, the mirror, which calls for introspection. So look at the other object, turn your gaze outside of your own circle, your own comfort zone. And the third and the most difficult one, the mirror looking at things. All this and the way I described it, from the arrival to the learning to the realization and call and need for separation and forgiveness, suggests a complete poem. And this would be absolutely very nice if indeed this was a complete poem. But it is not. It is just a quarter, 25% of a more complete poem. So before I take you into looking at the totality of the poem, I want to invite you with me into the second verse because this is where the questions will arise. And I learned name for every eyelash and nail, for every hair on flesh uncovered made light, and the fragrance of childhood of rosin and pine was the sweet fragrance of our bodies' night. How inviting, how easy to believe that we are looking at a description of an intimate experience, a night in which touch and smell and fragrance and the night, also memories of some childhood fragrance. And then there is this enumeration of minute, small parts of the body, like an eyelash and a nail and a single hair. And yes, indeed, again, one could think about, playful erotic game when every little item of the beloved's body counts and needs to be paid attention to and caressed and loved. But just open a window in your mind to another possibility. Because if, as some critics suggest, there is a very strong possibility that this is not about a lover, but about a memory of a very early childhood, close physical relationship with a father who is not anymore in her life, who was left behind because of his condition, something that needs forgiveness, something that needs some power to help let go of, then you can conjure in your mind a totally different image when fathers or parents are teaching a little child the names of the different parts of the body. This is an eyelash, this is a nail, this is hair. And then there is closeness of body to a parent, and there is fragrance, and there is, the Eastern European, Lithuanian smells and fragrance of childhood, of the pine trees, etc., with whom we shall conclude today pine trees are important. I don't want to be the judge of that. I just want to leave this possible reading there because it is there or it is suggested by so many. If indeed this is the reading that we want to adopt, at least for a short while, so it connects very well with if there is torments, they sailed to you. This coming and going probably of the waves of regret, pain, longing could be there. Let me now embrace again. So this is the whole poem, Slichot. And as you can see, we were reading the 3 verses of the Aleph, and then there is Bet, Gimel, and Dalid. This is slightly enlarged. So I want you to look at the original place of publication, which is not Leah Goldberg's first book, where many people know about this poem from, which was published in 1939, but Turim. Now, Turim is interesting. Turim, if you can go, if your Hebrew is good enough for that, go left of the title and you see Shavuon Shel Chavurat Sofrim Yachdav Be'arichat Aleph Shlonsky, just left of the big title, the name of the publication. So Yachdav is indeed that literary group comprised of the big names of the period. So Shlonsky is at the head of them, and there is Alterman, and there is Alexander Penn, and as soon as she arrives in 1935, Leah Goldberg. Turim is indeed the publication of this particular group, Yachdav. Shlonsky at the head, not for a long time, because in this very year, not only does Leah Goldberg publish Slichot, but Alterman will publish his first extremely important book of poetry, Kochovim Bachus, Stars Outside, that will push him to the top of this group and to the highest rank in Israeli poetry or Hebrew poetry of the time. So Shlonsky is really the factotum. He is the one who decides who gets published when. And here is Leah Goldberg on the cover page, just arrived, an Ola Chadasha, okay, already part of Yachdav, of this group. She wrote Slichot, Shlonsky publishes. Please note the date, Sivan Taf Reish Tzadik Chet, and it's Gilayon Yud Aleph, Shana Bet, it's the second year of that. I checked out Sivan Taf Reish Tzadik Chet, of course, and indeed it is summer and way before those events that will start rolling, the imminent Shoah, are starting to happen in early November of that very same year. Also, there's a lot of unrest here at the Yishuv in Eretz Israel at the time. Leah Goldberg sticks to her personal poetry, as we have seen throughout her lifetime on one level. On another level, she will publish other things that connect to contemporary events. So I wanted you to see that. And now we are continuing to the bit thing. So let me start looking with you. I'm going to do a little bit of the Ivrit, and then we will go to the English. אשמתי מאוד כי עודני זוכרת, מגע צעדיך בשחור הדממה. הייתה סליחתי נבונה ואחרת, עכשיו היא פשוטה כדמעה. I'm guilty for I still remember the touch of your footsteps in the dark silence. My forgiveness used to be smart and different. Now it is as simple as a star. Your face is calm in my silent gaze. Your body evaporated and became a song or a poem. The Hebrew says mizmor. One would wonder, almost like a perek in Tehillim, a mizmor. And here only the sea salt on the lips, only the sun smell in the suntanned skin. I will not come back to die in your hands. Let me keep all your prayers silent. Just look and bless the high blue as it sinks into the deep blue. I try to give, an anywhere picture on the seashore of Eretz Israel. I was looking for somebody with something for not too many Tel Aviv buildings, although probably the seashore experience of Leah Goldberg is Tel Aviv. But I wanted just to see another high rises of Tel Aviv that you will find today. If the first part, the Aleph, as we have seen it, dealt with Bata Elai, it's about you. Now we adopt the mirror, remember? There is introspection, and it starts with Ashamti Me'od. And there is no possible Jewish reading of a sentence that starts with the word Ashamti that will not take you back to the enumeration of our sins, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Chatanu, Avinu, etc. So there is a little bit of that, not mamash a quote, but it's reminiscent. And not just simply Ashamnu Bagadnu, Ashamti Me'od, says the Hebrew, which I could not successfully translate. Why? What is the source of the guilt feeling? Memory. For I still remember the touch of your footsteps in the dark silence. You always need to stop with a sentence like this, because footsteps do not have touch, they have sound. And it is oftentimes done in poetry to sort of cheat, lull the reader into not paying attention that she replaced one sense, the hearing, with another, the touch. Or that now, looking back from a distance, that sound of footsteps in the dark silence are as if touching her. Look at the second part of this verse. My forgiveness used to be smart and different. Now it is as simple as a tear. Is she referring to a period of time when she worked hard on finding causes? Let's go with the father reading, okay? Of finding causes, figuring out why it is okay to get the father out of the house. By the way, in some of the biographies that one reads, it was the child, the very young Leah Goldberg at the time her father is losing it, that needed and demanded for him to be taken out of the home because he became dangerous in his outbursts and probably violence. So, was that a time as she's growing up, as she's a teenager going to a high school, that she goes through a process, maybe with her mother, of figuring out a forgiveness that is smart and is maturity and distance and the understanding with what is starting to happen in Europe now that they're not ever going to see each other, who knows? But that complicated, smart type of forgiveness is changing now into a tear. Just like Bata Eli, you came to me at the beginning, we turn again to the addressee. Your face is calm in my silent gaze. So it's very clear he's not there. It's just a memory. And also, silence, gazes do not have sound. Again, this mixture of senses. It's as if a gaze could be noisy or silent. Your body evaporated and became a song. Wow, a mizmor. This is what happened. I am not in contact with you anymore. And now the two lines that I love so much, for which I will take you back to the previous line, and we go back to the second verse there. At the fragrance of childhood of resin and pine. These are the smells of Lithuania. But now we are in Eretz Israel, okay? And in Eretz Israel, and here, only the sea salt on the lips, only the sun smell in the sun tanned skin. So a whole world of sensuality has changed. No pine trees, no smell of childhood, the here and now. And what you have in the here and now is the sea salt on the lips. She doesn't say my lips, everybody's lips, only the sun smell in the sun tanned skin. I'm going to finish the bit and then come back to this line because it's extremely important. I will not come back to die in your hand. Is there a thought? Was there a thought of maybe traveling back? We could go with the father reading to Lithuania. We could go with the lover reading to Germany, to other places where he is at. No, there is a clear rationality. I'm not going back there because that will be death. Let me keep all your prayers silent. The Hebrew is harsheni. It's beyond let me, is permit me. Give me the permission, the reshut, to keep all your prayers silence. Just look and bless. Rakra'e v'kadesh. I didn't know how to exactly translate kadesh, sanctify, so I chose bless. And then back to the such Israeli image. The high blue, namely the sky, sinks into the deep blue, namely the sea. And it's such an Israeli image that anybody living in our parts will understand so well. As you are on the beach or even far away from it, you know how these two blues connect. I want to take you back to the line with the salt on the lips and the skin that is tanned, because that is a very telling line, and I'm not sure how clear it is. So I'm taking the time to really do a midrash on it. We are talking at a time when, generally speaking, one is not aware of the dangers of being suntanned. These are not our days where we cover and put all those ointments and whatever, and we are not supposed to get suntanned. Neither are we in Europe, where beauty of women is, Western Europe for sure, is to be light of color, not to be dark. This is the new, I'll call it by its name, Zionist reality of Eretz Israel. You were the pale diaspora Jew and you needed to come here. And the first external sign of belonging is to be suntanned. And the issue of getting suntanned appears in so much of the poetry, but mainly in children's literature. In children's literature, when you have this classical motif, especially immediately after the Shoah, where, say, the main figure of a children's story, like Echad Mishelanu for one, or Shnei Ra'im Yetzu Laderech, one of us, two friends got on the road, and many such children's stories of the period. I'm talking about late 40s, beginning of the 50s. So I'm still reading them as a child. Later, my children, grandkids were not interested anymore. What was the main story? We have a narrator voice. It's a child, 10 years old, 12 years old, bar mitzvah, a year before, a year after, it doesn't matter. And they live in a moshav, in the kibbutz, in whatever. And dad is off with the Jewish brigade of the British Army to fight against the Nazis. War is over, hallelujah, b'sha'a tova. Dad does not get released of the military, chas v'chalila. Dad stays in Europe to take care of the Jewish survivors and to bring them back home. By that, you do not suggest their shtetl in Poland or Hungary. By that, you mean Eretz Israel. And so Dad will appear at the doorstep one day, b'sha'a tova, with this, so gola looking little boy. First of all, he is pale. Then he has shorts that are too long. You know, they reach his knees. Today you would call them Bermudas. But at the time, Israeli kids or Eretz Israel kids had very short shorts. And so his are not of the right length. And he even covers his head, normally not a kippah, but a casquette. So the suggestion is not necessarily religiosity, but rather this chutz la'aretz attitude. And his name, of course, is Yankele or Shmaya or whatever, or Shmil. And he has nightmares. He wakes up at night, crying. He doesn't trust that there'll be enough food. So in every meal, he takes a slice of bread or something and puts in his pocket. And then he keeps them under his pillow. And then they rot or dry there or whatever. And it's very annoying. La 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 la, fast forward. At the end of the story, we will come to visit in the kibbutz yard or the moshav basketball field or whatever. And from a distance, you will see a group of kids and you will not be able to tell our hero apart. First of all, he is not Yankale Chas v'Chalila Tfu Tfu Tfu. He is Yaki or Kobi or something that is much more Eretz Israel than Yankale. But the major feature is that he is shirtless and suntanned. And because of that, you cannot tell him apart. So I gave you one example, but for example, in my summer program, in my evening classes, I will start teaching Natan Zach, who too is an immigrant child like Yehuda Amichai at the time, etc. There is a whole generation who come as very young teens to Eretz Israel. And they all have this issue of being pale and needing to be suntanned. Amichai has a poem that starts with the line, Asur leharot pachad vetzarich liot shazuf. You are not to show fear and you need to be suntanned. So this is the voice of a generation. This is the voice of the period. Unaware of skin cancer, I'll grant you that. But the outside look of the proper Eretz Israel person, suntanned. And although Leah Goldberg never in her poetry goes to that macho, Nivnei Arzeno kind of type of poetry and songs that you will find with Shlonsky, that you will find with Alterman and with the others, yet there are a few elements that cannot escape. And somehow the suntan remains. And when I made the decision to translate the whole of this poem, because for years I've been annoyed of the fact that we consider the first three stanzas as the whole poem and never taking the trouble to look at the complete work by Leah Goldberg. And I thought you were the perfect audience for me to take the step or the many steps to create it. And when I started working with this and got to this suntan thing, I could practically cry because, wow, Leah Goldberg, you too went for this, for the need to look like proper sabras. So let me stop for a moment. Of course, we are going back and doing the Gimel and Dalet as well, but just in case there are comments or questions so far. Yes, Esther, bevakasha, don't forget to unmute. And Dorothy, I'll come to you next.
I'm still troubled by the word smart because to me, the word smart here is a kind of, I'm not going to be rationalizing um, my feelings and my asking for forgiveness. And at the end, at the second, in the second stanza, however, she is very rational. The way she says, I'm not coming back because I do not want to give up my life. So, uh, isn't she being smart? I mean,
I don't want to solve this before we are done reading the whole thing, but I'm just inviting you and others who are puzzled by this to look at almost a wave like back and forth between different feelings. The need to collect your thought and treat whatever is happening rationally. You wanted to come to Eretz Israel, you wanted to make Aliyah, and feelings that cannot be controlled. And there is this give and take between rationality and total given into emotions. Look at even the beginning of Bet, Ashamti me'od, like she starts with a terrible guilt feeling. So where is the rationality, you know? And then again, rationalizing in the next one. So let us just leave this open for this. For me, the metaphor of the waves is perfect here, coming and going, although she doesn't use it for that, but maybe she's creating this wave motion. Yes, Esther, go ahead and then.
I think that silent gaze is also a sign that she's acquiescing to the situation. There's a kind of this is what I have. This is it.
Mhm.
So, and this, so maybe the waves, if she's really acquiescing on one hand, rationalizing on one hand, it's It
in a
fits the
very
way
bad place personally. And also, I need for all of us to remember, she's not a very mature person yet. She was born in 1911. This is 37, maybe written even a year before until it gets published. So what? She's 26, young woman, you know? This is also something because we will be reading much later poetry, hopefully today by her, and just bear that in mind as well, okay? Her age. She's really a very young woman. And Dorothy, you had your hand up?
Yes, although I didn't live through that situation, I remember very well in the early 50s in the south of France, the second generation Armenian people had the opposite problem. They hid away from the sun so they wouldn't get darker. And it was exactly the same situation. Their aim was to be white.
Like the others.
Like the others. So it is a matter of geography, of integration, really, anywhere. It's not specific to Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. You try to blend in. You
That's
try
right.
to become like the rest of them.
Mhm.
And for the Armenians, then in the south of France, it would be cover yourself from the sun. And for
Exactly.
the Olim from Eastern Europe, it would be expose yourself and become suntanned. Okay. Thank you very much. Do I have any other questions, comments, insights on the bet part before we are on to the Gimel? Okay, checking, no hands, let's go. I tried even with my graphics to give you a notion that there is a change of time. And indeed, like with the Aleph Bet parts of this poem, Slichot, the first line is very telling. The first, remember the Aleph started Bata Elai. The second one starts with Ashamti Me'od. So there is the coming, the appearance of that person in the first one. There is the introspection and guilt of the narrator voice, the poetic voice. And now there's an invitation, Rega, let go. It doesn't matter. Let me tell you what's around me. עוד זאת השעה הזורחת אל גל. I wish I had the talent to translate this properly. We'll come to that in a moment. עוד תכלת בים טובלת. הלילה ירח יקצור במגל את זהב תוגתי הנבהלת. את זכר גופך בליטוף הימי, את האופק הבא אליך, אותך העוזב את חופי I could read it earlier and cannot now. כמי שאינו רוצה ללכת. אז אגש אל חלון לבקש פתרונים, והאופל יפתח לי לועה, ואבין כי אנחנו נהיה אחרונים, אחרונים היודעים לסלוח. Note how forgiveness appears in all the parts. Towards the end, always the third stanza, but let me take you to the beginning. We are at a time of changing light. And we start with a word that, again, I could spend a whole class on the use of the word od in the poetry of 1938, namely Kochavim Bachutz by Alterman. עוד חוזר הניגון שזנחת לשווא, והדרך עודנה. The nigun that you have left behind is coming back. Alterman actually introduced a whole concept of starting poetic lines with the notion that there was something before that you do not explicitly talk about, but you want your audience to be aware of. Od zot hasha'ah. So it's still lingering. This is still the hour shining towards the waves. It's probably sunset. I went for waves in the plural because it sounded best to me in the translation, but the Hebrew is singular. Hashemesh hazorachat el gal. It's the Hasha'a hazorachat. The hour is shining towards the wave. And the second one, Odchelet bayam tovelet. The blue sky still dips in the sea. I introduced the word sky just to make sure that the tchelet probably refers to the sky as it dips into that other tchelet, maybe not tchelet anymore because the sun is setting. And now before time even, because we had all the verbs in the present tense, tovelet, zorachat, it's happening now, shining and dips. But the next line brings the future. So we are actually at the moment of changing light, changing time. Tonight, the moon will reap with a sickle the gold of my frightened sorrow. What does it exactly mean? Frightened sorrow, and why is it golden? And what can the moon do to it to sort of likzor, to reap it? Will the moon cut it off? Will the moon take it to itself? What does it exactly mean? And why is the sorrow so frightened? What is she so scared of? And if so, why is it golden? Oh, this is a very difficult line for me, but I will try. And I even have a drink just in case I choke up because it has a very personal meaning. But yalla, let's go inside. The memory of your body in the sea's caress. את זכר גופך בליטוף הימי. There is a memory of a body. The caress is not of the body. The caress is by dipping into the sea's caress. So she goes into the sea to let the water emulate, bring back the memory of a body. Why did I say that this was personal? My mom was a swimmer throughout her life, almost to the very end, every day of the year, no matter the season. She's the one who taught me swimming in the Mediterranean, in this sea. And when she passed, and ever since, it's now 11 years soon, no, 11 over actually, we're into the 12th year. I oftentimes feel her touch when I swim in the Mediterranean. I can even tell you something that is not so halachically kosher, but I'm sharing it with you, that when we were sitting Shiva with my sister here in Yafo in my home, before people, came to offer condolences early in the morning, we started our Shiva every day by going into the sea, by swimming for our mom's memory. My Shiva included swimming every single day to feel this sea caress of the body that is now just remembered. I can so totally see myself in that, where you offer this important element of nature, the sea with its undulating movement, be the one who helps you keep a memory. Okay, I did it. The horizon that is reaching you, you who are leaving my shores as if not wanting to go. So the memory is not only of the body. Et zecher gufcha in the water, את האופק הבא אליך, it also keeps that horizon that is coming to you, or maybe he is disappearing into the horizon. You are leaving my shore. She is again, Esther, you would say, is it rational or not? But she is on the shore and he is leaving, but like someone who doesn't want to go. Or maybe the narrator voice doesn't want to let go. Wow, look at what she does to us. She brings us back to the first part, the window thing. We have the glance, the window, and the mirror. We are now in the window. I will then approach the window seeking answers. That is one important way of looking at things. I opted answers, but the Hebrew is pitronim. And pitronim is the word that we will find in Bereshit as per Joseph dreams, for example. Liftor chalom. So I really debated between the choice of English, and if you can come up with a better word for me than answers, I will really embrace it. So you go to the window to ask for pitron, pitronim. Also remember and note, this is something that I need to say at this point. It just came to me. This is a moment when you need to remember that this is written before the Shoah, because I don't think a modern post-Shoah writer in their right mind use any way or form of the word pitaron since the Nazis brought the Pitaron Sofi, the final solution, into our world. But in a pre-Shoah world, the only connection that we make is to Bereshit and Pitronim and the dreams of Joseph. After the Shoah, Pitaron carries a totally different meaning. So as you said earlier, Dorothy, it's a question of where with the immigrants. For us reading a poetic text, it's also a question of when and what additional allusions words carry. See, it doesn't matter how many times you look at the poem, there always will be a new insight. Okay. So Egash Lachalon, we remain the future. Remember, she is planning at night to go to the window to ask for answers. The dark will open its mouth, and I will know we are the last ones who know how to forgive. So this is, we are moving back, I would say, to the mirror phase, because by looking at the window for pitronim and answers, and dafka, enlightenment and understanding comes not with light, not with sunrise, but with the darkness, with the moon. And this is when you realize that you and this other partner in this poem, whether a beloved or the memory of a tortured father, are the ones who will know how to forgive. We come to the last, to the Dalid. And this is so beautiful for me to share with you, for a confession that I need to make. When I started to translate this, I did not totally understand the use of the word tarfei, trafim in Hebrew, because I remember the trafim that Rachel was hiding, but that was something else. What is the trafim here? And it turns out that the word trafim also means blades of a plant, part of a leaf, the flat part of a leaf. I did not know that. Now I do. And the chamomile plant. So there is also a taste associated and a smell. But what I want to point out to us to remember, because I already said something about the year, and I already said something about Leah Goldberg's age, and I already said something about the fact that this is written 2-3 years after she makes Aliyah. And you understand that better than me, the command of the language. If I, being practically 75, having lived all my life in Israel and dealing with language and words, and I still needed to go to the dictionary to look up the meaning of a given word, the additional meaning, how much more admirable is the command of language of Leah Goldberg at this early phase of her life in Israel. She comes, of course, with having learned Hebrew. She comes with a PhD of the Shomronim Girsa of the biblical text. She knows about languages, and yet. So the month was divining on chamomile blades, lenachesh, to deal with divination by plucking flowers or their leaves. It tore out my days, throwing them into the deep. Again, I opted deep for Tehom. The abyss didn't sound so good to me here. Splendor and punishment, pain and bliss, the dream interpretation, Pitron Chalom. So again, going back to the suggestion that we had earlier with my conversation with Esther, the fluctuation of feelings. And she is now playing around with that herself by imagining this, plucking of leaves of the trafim, of the chamomile leaf, and each one of them carries a feeling, and you need to drop each one of them into the deep. The splendor, the zohar, the punishment, the pain, the bliss, all of them are pitron chalom. All of them are the interpretation of the dream. And now another sort of puzzlement. Let's listen to the Ivrit. Gachanti, kasharti srochei na'alecha. ליוויתי אותך עד סיפי הנמוך, ובדרך אליה בכל משעוליך, לבלב יגוני כחיוך. I bended down to lace your shoes. I escorted you to my low threshold. On my way to it, in all your path, my sorrow flourished with a smile. Now, I really don't know, and I'm sort of jumping into deep water, but I will say it. I live a very meaningful love relationship. I never needed or wanted to lace my beloved, my husband's shoelaces. Maybe a day, chas v'chalila, will come that this will be needed. But this description of devoted doing something for a beloved person goes in my mind so much more towards the suggestion that this is about the relationship with a very sick father than the relationship with a beloved person. And so you bend and you do whatever is necessary for that person. And you invite them into Sipi Hanamuch, my low threshold. Is she bringing him into whatever modest home she has? And on the way, in all those paths, in all your paths, my sorrow flourished with a smile. Remember that earlier, her very rational regret turned into a tear. Now the sorrow turns into a smile. Interesting. And we conclude. התפללתי לאור שמחתך שהבשילה, אגרתי לך את שלוות הימים, הרכנתי ראשי כשחזרת חלילה, חזרת קרוב ותמים. I think that if all the Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet parts of this poem, each with their 3 verses, were descriptive of a given moment, hour, shifting hour, like the sunset, this one is describing like maybe a larger process of time and understanding. I prayed in the light of your maturing joy. I collected or maybe even hoarded for you the calm of the days. I bowed my head when you kept returning. You came back close and innocent. So if indeed we are adopting that image of never letting go and constantly living with the shifting moods and modes, this can lead us to read this as a looking back at their relationship with the father who, because of having been tortured immediately after World War One, lost his mind, became emotionally sick, and needed to be committed to an asylum. He could never make Aliyah with her and her mother as they did come. And like many mentally ailing people during the Nazi regime, he was killed. She doesn't know that in 1938. She will only find out about it in 1943. But this is the situation that I think I tend to read this. Now to the part about the song. So Leah Goldberg dies in 1970. And in the 70s in Israel, we have Festival HaZemer. So on Motzei Yom HaAtzmaut, we did not yet come around to have the Eurovision contest. We have Festival HaZemer Ivri. And every year, singers and composers, etc., and lyric writers are competing. And normally it's not the great ones who are competing. This is just a chance to invite new talent. And one of the composers somehow stumbles over this early book of Leah Goldberg called Shibolet Yerukat Ha'ayin, which includes my favorite poem of all Israeli poetry, Shibolet Yerukat Ha'ayin by Leah Goldberg, but that's for another story. And he sets it to music. And through the intervention of Shaike, the chief of the three Shloshet HaGashash HaChiver, comedians, well known, one of whom had passed, unfortunately, they are sending it to the festival. Two problems. The festival director, who will remain unnamed, expresses himself in an extremely, how shall I say this politely, classical, secular Israeli Sabra attitude to a poem called Slichot. Do I need to elaborate? Too religious, to this and that, ma pitom, no way, thank you very much. The other opposition comes from two famous singers who will remain unnamed, who don't want to touch it. They want something more modern, they want something more now, and therefore no and thank you, no. One of them is still a major one. And so the person who wrote and Shaike from the Gashashim still want to make it happen. And they find a totally unknown singer who was just released from the military. She is not so sure either, but Shaike Levi of the Gashashim, and it's on record, and she says that in interviews, wrote to her and said, "You will thank me for this. This will be the song that will make you." So I'm going to share with you a clip of Judith Ravitz at 20, totally unknown singer, being introduced as song number 9 of 10 on Festival HaZemer of 77 by Rivka Michaeli. No subtitles, but you know now the topic. Let us just enjoy it. Give me a minute to put it on.
שיר מספר 9 הנקרא סליחות.
Can you hear and see? Just somebody unmute and tell me.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, yalla, let's go.
הזמרת היא כמעט פנים חדשות, כמעט לגמרי. היא נולדה במבצע קדש, גדלה לגמרי בבאר שבע, מלחינה שירים מגיל 14, אפילו 2 הוקלטו בגלי צהל, לא, הערב היא לא כתבה את השיר שהיא תשמיע. על כל פנים היא הופיעה בצוות הוואי של הנדסה קרבית, והיום היא חברה בלהקה חדשה הנקראת ששת. היא תלווה את עצמה בגיטרה, שיר מספר 9, סליחות, יהודית רביץ.
באת
Thank you for listening. And at this point, I have a question to you. In a recent interview, Judith Ravi is obviously much, much, much older than she is in this clip from 1977, had mentioned the fact that in every single live concert that she had performed in since she is asked to sing this one, she doesn't have one single concert in which Slichot is not sung. So that's one thing to consider for a moment. The other is, if you listen to Israeli television stations during Elul, the end of Elul, and between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, this is the song most often played for Slichot. And the question is why? Is there indeed somehow an inner spiritual connection that goes beyond the personal story, whether we read it as the relationship with the father, whether, as some would prefer, just based on the Aleph, mind you, to read it as a relationship, an intimate relationship with a man that needs to be cut off and forgiveness asked? Is there anything that you yourself can see beyond in this one that will give this poem turned into song a life of its own that started symbolically, if you wish, 7 years after Leah Goldberg had died? So what's in Slichot to you, if there is anything?
Uh, uh, um, I don't particularly know, but if you extend, you could very well see life Chutz before. I mean, it is before Kristallnacht, but Kristallnacht didn't come out of fresh air. It built up to it, and then that was the part you call maybe the father. It's not too clear whether there was harassment or more to the smoothness and the love and the integration into Israel. You could see it like that if you really look further, don't you?
It's not about me now, it's about you. And the question is, and why does it become a Slichot song? Okay. And Matt, bevakasha. Please
I
unmute.
think that, this principle of Ox comes razor, the simple solution might be a good answer for things. I mean, it's a beautiful song. Whoever wrote the music, it's awesome music. And it's very, I don't know, to me, it's like Israeli music. It's very comfortable to listen to the music, forgetting anything else about the song. And then you take the title, which she gave it, I assume, and without any further deep meaning, this would be a natural thing to put on radio or television in this season.
Mm-hmm.
It could be as simple as that.
Okay, just simple, nice to listen to, has a good title, and that's good enough for you, Matt. Thank you. Judy, bevakasha.
They say that when someone is close to you is dying, the three things that you want to say: I love you, I forgive you, I hope you forgive me. This theme of forgiveness is so universal and so significant to all of us in the relationships we have with lovers, with family, with parents. It's just such a universal message, and the images are so magnificent, and the poetry is so beautiful, and it, like Matt said, it just makes sense that it would be so beloved. I couldn't help but crying. And I know this song, I know Yudit Ravitz's music, and I've heard it hundreds of times, but I never understood it before. I'm so grateful to you that this was a chance to really study the words, the poem.
Okay, thank you so much. So, all right, let me see if there are other comments or opinions about them. So I think I could go with you, Judy and Matt, because as oftentimes happens, you love a song, it's there, it's sung, it makes you feel good because some of the words or the tune or the inner conversation, batailai, etc., and you do not even pay too much attention. There is some beauty in it, there is some magic. I think there is magic in poetry, and it just works. So here is a song that, or a poem rather, that we spent now practically an hour looking at and reading. We rarely do that, spend a whole hour with one poem, but there are such poems that deserve that. I wanted you to have this hour because if our courses and our meetings are about windows into Israeli society through poetry, this is one of the, and I will adopt the Leah Goldberg a word usage. This is one of the mizmorim. She calls it mizmor in the poem itself, that needs to be known, that need to become yours. Forget the suntan, no slichot, no other such songs, poems to be part of the Israeli fabric. And this is my message to you. We let go of the suntan a little bit with the years, but we still have things that makes us belong. I'm going to move to yet another poem that I'm hoping to do today, which is important in the same way. So just checking if there is anything else before. Yofi, yalla, let's go. So we are going to do one more just to be read, and then one that we will. So this is the story of the festival and the date and everything. And I want for us to look at Yom Chofish by Leah Goldberg. I'll be asking for a reader this time, and it really catches a totally different mode. And I wanted for us to have this juxtaposition from the very slow, word by word, almost reading it as a Talmudic page that we did with Slichot. I want this one to just be as a declaration of indeed a day off, Yom Chofish. I'm going to read the Ivrit, and let me know if I have an English reader. Anybody?
I'm willing.
Okay, thank you. Your name, because I cannot see you when I have
Marilyn Adler. Hello.
Marilyn, that'll do. Thank you. Yom Chofish.
By the way, I would also like to be on your Hebrew list, but leave that aside for the moment.
Email me. Okay.
Okay. You want to read?
אני לוקחת יום חופש מגעגועי, מגילי, מזמני ומכל הספרים שביקשו ללמדני עולם בלשון קפדנים. וטוב לי לחשוב ולשאול ולא לחכות לתשובה. מה שם העץ הזה, ואיך מזמרים את שתיקת הציפור, ומאין נשא הרוח את הכוכב הזה, והאם אני אבודה בין דברים יפי קרבה, או אולי הרחוק ביותר משיב נפשי אליי. Will you read the English, Marilyn, please?
Okay. I am taking a day off from my longings, from my age, my time, and from all the books that tried to teach me a world with a pedantic tongue or with pedantic words. It feels good to think and to ask without waiting for an answer. What is the name of this tree? And how does one sing the bird's silence? And where did the wind carry this star from? And am I lost among things worthy of closeness? Or perhaps that which is farthest away revives my soul.
Thank you so much for this beautiful reading. And let us just spend a few minutes with this. The first verse to me is indeed this declaration when at a moment, I don't know, tiredness, fatigue, a decision, I know that I have a zillion things to do and I do not care and I want this day off. And what do you need to be on chofish, liberty, freedom? Because the Hebrew is not just a day off, it's a day of chofish, of freedom, of liberty. The first thing you want to kick is your longings, the thing you miss, you wish for, whatever they are, leave me alone for a bit. Oh, and that age thing. You really, when you take the day off, the day of Chofish, you don't want to think of your age and of your aging. And the time that is really pressuring, you know, you have to do this and that, and probably deadlines and what have you. And this I love. And from the books that try to teach me a world with a pedantic tongue, like this necessity that I so know personally, the need to look up everything and research and make sure of all those things that they were trying to teach me. Occasionally, you need some chofish from that. And then once you have managed to at least say that, if not even release yourself, it feels good to think and to ask without waiting for an answer. Remember the earlier poem where she was looking for pitronim, which I translated answer? Here the Hebrew is not pitronim, but really tshuva, answer. Bear in mind, because of what we discussed earlier, that tshuva in Judaism also has another meaning of lachzor b'tshuva. I'm not sure it's there, but when a word is used, it carries many, many meanings. And what are the things that you feel so pressured to know and oftentimes do not know? What is the name of this tree again? And how does one sing the bird's silence? Actually, she shifted here, didn't she? She moved into the world of her work back, the Ars Poetica. How do you sing the bird's silence? How do you write a poem about it? And where did the wind carry this star from? A fantasy question. And now that closing, oftentimes apparent in Leah Goldberg's poetry, that mirror gaze, that introspection, the need to understand yourself. If you take the day off, maybe you will get an answer to the following. Am I lost among things worthy of closeness? Or perhaps that which is furthest away revives my soul. I want to add here a thing that you may want to look at, especially those of you who speak Ivrit, because I don't think that particular documentary has English subtitles. I forgot to check, and I may for you. There is a site on the internet called Ha-Ivrim, Ivrim with an ayin and a bet, not Ivrim as in blind, but Ivrim as in Hebrews. And it is a site where you have a collection of video clip interviews about great writers. And then out of that collection of interviews, a very talented documentary movie maker have created a series of films. Not all are yet done. There is a beautiful Zelda one. There is a beautiful Sutskover one. There is an amazing Bialik one. And there is a beautiful Leah Goldberg one. So those of you who can enjoy the Ivrit and check, there might be a version with subtitles, will be able to see indeed how people who knew Leah Goldberg personally were speaking about this distance thing in her life. In a particular, to me, beautiful interview by Chaim Be'er about Leah Goldberg, he talks about her need to be in constant movement. She used to go to Tachana Merkazit in Yerushalayim, take the bus to Tel Aviv, and as soon as it arrived, to take the bus back to Yerushalayim. Her body craved the ride. Her mind needed the movement, the not being in one place. It is reflected in this poem, but it is much better reflected in the one I am planning to conclude our Leah Goldberg studies for this cycle. So you see how much I'm skipping, but I want to come to this. Again, I'm not going to qualify it as the best known, the most important, blah, 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 not important. It doesn't need medals or grades. Oren, I'm doing the Ivrit and the English, and thank God it was a beautiful professional translation, but Rachel Tzvi Beck. כאן לא אשמע את כל הקוקייה, כאן לא יחבוש העץ מצנפת שלג, אבל בצל האורנים האלה כל ילדותי שקמה לתחייה. צלצול המחטים היו היה אקרא מולדת למרחב השלג, לקרח ירקרק קובל הפלג, ללשון השיר בארץ נוכריה. אולי רק ציפורי מסע יודעות, כשהן תלויות בין ארץ ושמיים, את זה הכאב של שתי המולדות. איתכם אני נשתלתי פעמיים, איתכם אני צמחתי אורנים, ושורשיי בשני נופים שונים. Look how the English title is not an exact translation of the Hebrew one. There is an interesting phenomenon with this poem that in different books and collections, it has different titles. So you will see it in Hebrew under Oren, Oranim, or Ilanot. And Tzvi Beck had preferred the Ilanot trees one. Here I will not hear the voice of the cuckoo. Here the tree will not wear a cape of snow. But it is here in the shade of these pines, my whole childhood reawakens, the chime of the needles once upon a time. So this is a reflective poem, not about introspective as before, it will come later, but rather the place, the here, the Eretz Israel, maybe already B'Sha'at Tova, the Jerusalem phase. She had moved from Tel Aviv to Yerushalayim to open the chair for comparative literature in Hebrew. So here, I will not hear the voice of the cuckoo, all the things that she is missing. The trees are not going to have the snowy capes. The sounds will be different, but it's enough to have the pine trees present here to have the chime of needles reawaken the childhood sounds that she has from back home. Since we are looking at the beautiful translation, I want you to notice something. Oftentimes, of course, languages have the onomatopoeia, the sound thing, and the Hebrew is so beautifully going with the cuckoo. Kan lo eshma et kol hakukiya, which does not work the same way in English. But Tzvi Beck did something similar with the here. Here I will not hear, here the three will wear. So she worked very hard to give the English reader a sense of the need to listen to the sound. So actually, Chaverim, you know, unheard of, practically unheard of, not true, heard of. In modern Zionist pioneering literature, is one of those chalutzim supposed to miss the old country? Not so kosher. And yet, an open, you know, confession, I think about it a lot, even under these trees. The chime of the needles, once upon a time, the Hebrew is hayo haya. I called the snow space homeland. Actually, it did, ekra moledet. She's not denying it. Lithuania was home. And the green ice of the river's edge was the poem's grammar in a foreign land. I needed to, you know, I started writing in Russian and then only. And now the heart of this poem, the lines so often quoted, and especially one of them. Perhaps only migrating birds know, suspended between earth and sky, the heartache of two homelands. I'm doing the Hebrew as well, because I want you to be aware of it. אולי רק ציפורי מסע יודעות כשהן תלויות בין ארץ ושמיים, את זה הכאב של שתי המולדות. This pain of two homelands. As we are facing this text, I want you to really hold it in your eyes, in your heart. The open, honest admission, I have two homelands. Totally Zionist, totally committed to the cause, never considered leaving Israel, lived here until her death from the day she arrived for 35 years. And yet that other homeland and the feeling about it as a homeland had not disappeared. And therefore she is looking and finding the best metaphor of the migrating birds who legitimately have two homelands. She can identify with those. With you, pine trees, I was transplanted twice. With you, pine trees, I grew roots in two disparate landscapes. Itchem ani nishtalti pa'amayim. There is, I trust many of you know, a very famous rendition of this by Achinoam Nini. You will have to give me a moment to put it on, and once it's there on my screen, I'll be able to share it with you. Let us go. Can you hear it? There is no image now, just sound.
Yes.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
go.
מצנפת שלג, אבל בצל האורנים האלה כל ילדותי שקמה לתחייה. צלצול המחטים היה אקרא מונדת למרחב השלג, לקרח ירקרק קובל הפלג, ללשון השיר בארץ נוכריה. Well, I remember those snow-capped mountains and a song on FM 93. Oh, my darling, I have grown with you, but my roots on both sides of the sea. אולי רק ציפורים מסע יודעות, כשהן תלויות בין ארץ לשמיים. את זה הכאב של שתי המולדות. איתכם אני נשתלתי פעמיים, איתכם אני צמחתי אורנית ושורשיי בשני נופים שונים, שורשיי בשני נופים שונים.
שורשיי בשני נופים שונים. My roots are in two very different landscapes. Let me invite you back for a minute to my PowerPoint so I can share with you what is coming as of next week. We will start looking again, scratching the top, of one of the most amazing poets of the 20th century here in Israel, Uri Zvi Greenberg. and we will dedicate all the sessions that we still have till the end of the Omer series to his work. I hope you will enjoy it. Less set to music, but beautiful, beautiful poetry, not easy. Toda rabah, everybody, for being here.